I'm Jackie Ware,
I'm Mike Ivey,
and you're on air with Jackie Ware.
episode 4.
Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Can you share a little bit about your background in multifamily?
Mike Ivey, I'm currently the GM of our Living and Loyalty division at RealPage. So I run our resident portals, our rewards and loyalty programs, and kind of everything that touches the renter after they move in. That's why we call it living as opposed to leasing. I have a bit of a weird background in terms of how I got into the industry. I was like, it's funny. I was thinking about this on the way up here. It was a failed spring break in college that directly led to me being in multifamily. And the short version of it was I was supposed to go to one city with some friends. That ended up falling through. Ended up going to another city with a bunch of people I knew and a bunch of people I didn't know. And through that random last minute change of what we were doing over spring break, 5 years later, the group that we met was in Dallas, and I was trying to come up with an apartment startup. And the guy who ended up co-founding Modern Message with me was in that group, and we hadn't seen each other in years. And he's like, "Hey, Mike, you're starting something. You should talk to John Hinckley, who was the co-founder of Modern Message with me."
No way.
And so we bumped into each other at church. We met on that spring break trip, which is why I point to that.
Spring break in church, there's a combo.
I know. Who would have thought? You usually don't say those things in the same sentence. And so after about a year and a half, John and I formed what ultimately became Modern Message and Community Rewards. And then 8 years later, we sold that to RealPage. So at the time, I was working in Big Four accounting. So something totally different than software and real estate. I had no background in either of them. I just thought I had a unique take and learned how to code, all these things on nights and weekends when my wife went back to grad school. So when she was off studying, I was learning how to code and starting a business on the side.
Wow.
And then through my connections with John, we ended up starting a business, and 8 years later, we sold it. So totally crazy. Never would have thought I'd be here at all by any stretch of the imagination. It was not my undergrad degree. Like I said, I had no history in multifamily. And then over the course of the last 8 years, learned the software industry, grew that business quite substantially, and then now inside of RealPage. And actually, since then, I've actually gotten to buy some apartments as well. So now seeing it on the owner side, the vendor side, it's just been an interesting foray into all things multifamily.
Oh, that's amazing. How long have you been at RealPage now?
Since 2020. So we sold basically February 1st of 2020. So like weeks before COVID happened. And then all of 2020 was everyone just kind of like buckle up and try to, hold on to the roller coaster ride that was COVID. Yeah. And so it's been such an interesting juxtaposition of both startup life pre-COVID and corporate life in the midst and then after COVID, watching the industry deal with something that honestly, I don't think we've dealt with since maybe the great financial crisis of 2008 in terms of higher interest rates, just an entirely different macroeconomic environment. And so being able to see it on all sides has been super interesting. So I've been here for almost 5 years now.
Okay, well, that's great because I think we're all trying to figure out how to navigate that space. Really, 2020 was so pivotal for all of us, especially in the multifamily industry. But we're all trying to figure out the best path forward and predicting analysis for the future because no one knows exactly where we're going to land. So RealPage is known to be a very technological in front of innovations in property management. So can you briefly explain how your team is involved in shaping the resident experience?
So we're candidly, I think, the team who's shaping the resident experience inside of RealPage. So I mentioned I run our Living and Loyalty division. I have colleagues who run our leasing division, living division, our payments division, things like that. So it's certainly not just my domain. We have a very strong corp dev team, a very strong strategy team. And so we all really work together to formulate, sort of think of it as a vision for what currently customers are telling us they need, where the broader technology environment and just frankly, the multifamily environment are trending. And then how do we navigate from point A to point B? These things are so often not a straight line, and it takes a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth with customers. It's like my whole point of view on software development is very much getting as close as possible to the customer because we're building for you guys ultimately. Like we need to make your jobs easier, your lives easier, and we also need to do right by the residents. We need to make sure that they're having a great experience from the moment they sign a lease till the moment they hopefully renew or eventually move out. How do we make that entire experience easier? Because ultimately, these are people living in their homes, they're renting, and they need to pay rent. They need to take care of certain things, but they're trying to live their lives. So how do we take technology out of the equation in many cases, make it so seamless and so intuitive that they don't even need to ask you a question about how to operate it? That's how we help you guys, free you up to do more. And if we can do that right, then we make the residents happier. All of that goodwill gets passed along to the management companies or the owners, and then hopefully that leads to a higher renewal.
Can you go a little bit deeper into some of the things that really add that value to the resident experience that your team's creating?
So me, specifically for my world, we're owning everything on the resident portal side. We just talked about COVID. Amenities were suddenly the hot topic for 3 years. We've always had amenities on site. We've always had ways in which we wanted residents to be aware of them and take advantage of it. But suddenly that had never, in my history, been a major talking point for software until 2020. And so suddenly that was just the hot topic. So how do we make that whole experience seamless, integrated, update the ledger, all of these things that your teams are having to do manually in many cases? How can we pull that into the platform? So that's just one example. With Loft, and we'll talk more about this, it's really about creating seamless experiences throughout the resident journey. So instead of having to go to different point solutions, we could probably talk for an hour about venture capital, private equity, and what that has done in multifamily. I don't think there's ever been a point in time where more companies have been started focusing on this industry. When I started in 2012, there wasn't an investor in Texas who cared to invest in apartments. They were like, it's kind of boring. You guys aren't out starting. It's funny on the software side. Absolutely. Now, Texas is not California, right? So it's not Silicon Valley. But everyone back then, it was all mobile, social. Everyone was like, oh, are you the next Facebook? And we're like, no, we're trying to just reward residents for doing things that, with community rewards, it was gamifying the resident experience, right? And so that didn't make a whole lot of sense to investors who just had never seen that product before. And frankly, we didn't have a competitor until 2021 for the most part. So
really,
it was a very interesting niche product that we created. It ended up being quite ubiquitous in various conventional and student. Anyway, so amenities was one example of just directly listening to the market. Now what we're hearing is because of so many of these point solutions, people are struggling with operating a diaspora, if that's the right word, of so many different tools in a world where you might be struggling, not you guys, but everyone, with retaining employees. And so how can you efficiently operate all of these assets in a world where your staff is turning over faster than ever, software is coming at you like fast and loose, there's more and more things to train. This can create just an extremely high level of inefficiencies. And so for us, it's looking at how can we tuck in various things into a platform. Instead of thinking of these things as different applications to handle different moments of the journey, how can we give someone one app end to end, one login, one wallet, right? Things that, if my family went to Disney a couple years ago, from the moment you show up on site, you have one app that handles every point of interaction with that brand. While Disney may be a bit aspirational for multifamily, like I think we could think bigger about how do we make it seamless.
We've definitely been behind the times for years. And that's one thing we really like our partnership with RealPage is that's what we're trying to define because we have a little bit of tech fatigue, right? Just to what you were speaking about. We wanted to be innovative just as RealPage, and we're trying to get a hold of all the new things that are going to make our people's lives easier on site, make our resident experience better. But then in that, after 2020, we did find ourselves like, I think at one point we had 8 different dashboards our teams were logging into. So we took a step back and I think everybody was like, please, not another rollout. In the beginning, everybody was excited. So that's the great thing about RealPage is that they're constantly trying to get everything under one umbrella for that seamless integration.
That's right. That's right.
So we really enjoy that as well. How do emerging technologies like AI and smart home devices and digital platforms play a role in enhancing and adding value to the resident experience? In your opinion?
So I tend to look at these things in like long-term view and short-term reality. And so smart home became a hot topic a number of years ago. Obviously now it's AI. And these are new ways to do old things we've done for a long time. I need to rent an apartment. I need to move, I need to open my door. I need to get into the building. These are things that have been happening for years. It's just a different technology angle to solving it. And so that's how I view AI right now is how can we simplify, how can we automate, how can we centralize, for a bit of a buzzword in our industry, how can we leverage these tools to, it's not necessarily about automate. In some cases, it might be it might be a better way to personalize the experience to a resident because we have some sense of what they've done in the past, who they are, these type of things. We can provide in their language, perhaps, a more personalized and 24/7 experience. I'm thinking back to when I rented, and this is largely still true today. If I need something for my office, I have office hours Monday through Saturday to deal with that, mostly when I'm working. And so it can be difficult for people to answer their questions because they're at work themselves. Well, with things like AI, what if that question that you need answered could be done at 10 o'clock at night when no one's at work? Because we can train an AI agent to answer that for you in real time, right? That's value add to the resident. And that's something directionally applicable to a product that we currently offer or that you currently offer. It's not something new you have to go get. It's simply an add-on component to something that you already offer. That's just like the general framework I have, is how can we apply new technologies to old problems and help everyone out in the midst of that.
I love that way of thinking. I think that really summarizes it well. RealPage has implemented some subscription-based services. Could you give us some examples and explain how they contribute to revenue growth while adding value to residents?
Yeah, an easy example here is insurance. We have another new subscription product around rent reporting. Things that are durable, residents always need to protect their stuff. You need them to have that layer of coverage. Newer, but certainly not brand new anymore, is someone being able to build their credit while they live with you. So for us, again, it goes back to, and I should have mentioned this before, on frankly, all of our designers' desks, we're all virtual now, mine as well, is a extremely detailed view of a resident journey. So what is every moment throughout a journey, from searching for an apartment to moving out? Like, what are all of the different touch points?
And what I love is that's a new concept to think about. It's as antiquated as that may sound. I don't think anybody's put a lot of thought or consideration into that complete journey and how it's changed with technology, which has made it great, but not if if the user's not technically savvy.
That's right.
So I do think that area that you guys are really focused on is going to be a game changer for everything.
We think so too. Honestly, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but so back to your question around subscription products. So we just look at it across a horizon. And honestly, now that we're private equity backed, a lot of new initiatives have to really be couched under a very clear ROI analysis, so AKA revenue. So how can we, as a company, make money, but how can we deliver value to either our clients or to the residents directly? And I think one of the things that's been interesting over the last couple of years is this concept of B2B to C. RealPage historically has been a data company. We're accounting, property management software, data. That's historically what was the strength of RealPage. And then we've layered on resident services, obviously, throughout the years. But all of that's been under the premise of we serve our clients and then we have solutions for their residents. Now, and we're not the only ones doing this, like things that can be sold directly to residents or just offered directly to residents without requiring your teams or anyone's teams to train and understand. So rent reporting is a good example, or insurance, like I mentioned before. And so again, we just look at it like, does it make sense in the context of a resident's journey? If it does, let's keep talking about it. If it doesn't, if it's completely outside the realm of what someone would expect from their renting environment, then we don't even consider it. And so through that lens comes, I think, a small but interesting number of opportunities to where we can potentially open new revenue streams as a company and then share that back with our customers at the end of the day.
Can you share some successful strategies you've seen that both improve the experience and increase profitability?
I think, and I'll say this several times around this type of question, which is, for me, it's all about shots on goal. So in other words, there's a famous marketing guru named Seth Godin, and he had a whole write-up a long time ago about the only way to have more good ideas is to have more bad ideas, because you don't know which is which until you start trying these things.
True.
And so one of the struggles that big companies get viewed as moving slower, it's because everything has to be done through a very clear strategic lens that everyone has to sign off on. So you tend to move slowly because there's got to be consensus. Well, what can happen is if that idea that took a long time doesn't work, the next iteration can take just as long, and next thing you know, you're moving slowly. So what I've seen really work effectively, both prior to RealPage and even now at RealPage, is trusting empowered product teams, so groups of people who can work autonomously. They understand the data that they're held accountable to, and you check in with them periodically. So I need you to go solve, maybe for a thing like a resident portal, we need registration numbers to go up because we want more payments to be done online, because we want to pull, this has been a major trend pre-COVID, but certainly post, is how do we pull more payments off-site? Like, we don't want them done in the office, we want them done online. So how can we actually make the onboarding and registration experience so seamless that higher and higher numbers of people sign up? Sometimes it's a UI UX change. Sometimes it's we need to be more, like maybe it's a different way in which we create accounts. Instead of email, it's phone number, these type of things. Because we play in all aspects of multifamily. So conventional, student, affordable. And specifically in affordable, they may not have emails, but they probably have phone numbers, or in some cases, vice versa. So how can we ensure that the data shows us that we're addressing everyone? They have a way to get in. And this doesn't have to be top down. Like, it doesn't need our CEO's approval to go do this, because that can take 6 months to have something agreed upon and delivered. And so it's a combination of and staffing a team of people who sit on top of certain key metrics and trusting them to do what they need to do while holding them accountable at the same time. And if you do that right, it's amazing what can happen, because people tend to literally, with the same company in the same environment, their happiness goes up, because now they're like, it's their own 2 cents and, you know, their own skins on the wall, so to speak, that's able to make these calls, and they're not just being told what to do. And what happens when people get motivated is they work harder.
And they're excited.
And they're excited. And so it's a self-reinforcing loop, so to speak. It's a positive feedback loop where trusting people more causes them to want to do better, and they work harder, and next thing you know, results improve over time. So maybe not a direct answer. Like, there's obviously we could go through a bunch of different success stories, but all of them sort of are rooted in not a top-down sort of very bureaucratic structure, but trusting people to do what they do.
To do what you hired them to do.
Exactly.
And expect that they're going to do a great job.
That's right.
Just kind of having the faith in them.
That's right.
So how important is personalization to the resident experience? And what tools or strategies do you recommend for properties aiming to deliver a more tailored service?
So this is one of those things, this is probably an area of, let's just call it corporate strategic planning, where things can die on the vine so slowly, because personalization is such a big term, and it can easily cause companies to just seize up because they're not sure what to do first. And so there's a lot of talking in the corporate offices and not a lot of movement at the site level. Generally, that's one of the things I've seen, is it's too big of a topic. Personally, one of the things, you know, my kids laugh, I don't say this to them as much, but my staff, I always say something along the lines of, what's the 80-20 here? Because with personalization, yes, you can devote years and a lot of capital to solve it at the 100%, but at the 20% level, which has 80% of the results, it's simply things like including names in a back and forth, right? So if you have some sort of templated email, how can we ensure that we're making sure that resident's name is included? There's some sort of personalized offer delivered to them. And so my suggestion is companies could ease into this. It goes back to what I was saying before about trial and error. Try things, figure out what works. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's the one thing that I've learned in my career, is if you're aiming for perfection, nothing ever happens.
True.
Because it rarely is perfect.
Well, I imagine in technology, something's always outpaced your next idea anyway, if you don't move fast enough.
Exactly. So with personalization, it's funny to me, you know, I built our email program at Modern Message, and so I've personally sent hundreds of millions of emails. And
congratulations.
I know. I'm going to add that to my LinkedIn profile. I only say that to say it's funny when you look at data from email campaigns. Minor tweaks can cause massive improvements in results, including names. Time of day matters. The way in which you phrase offers.
What's the best time of day to send an email? I'm going to start sending one. So
there's people, if you look at all the data, people say in the evening. So as people get home from work, and there's definitely like a demographic shift. Morning is also equally as effective in my mind. Like, and we had a very large student population, and we would see later at night, early morning were the two most effective times. And so from there, it's a good opportunity to try which one. Right?
And that's a good AI portion of this whole thing as well.
Exactly.
You're done with your day. I'm best in the morning, so.
Same for me.
I'm not as good in the evening.
I'm up early. I go to bed early. I have 3 young kids, so
I bet you're really busy then.
Yeah, I start my day at like 5, and then
so you don't sleep. You're very much like our COO Yakov. He gets up at 4 because he wants to get a workout in. He's got these kids. You know, he's busy.
Same way.
So Mike, one thing I really like is that this program rewards residents for behavior we're wanting. Just an example of paying on time helps us solve some of the delinquency challenges we're facing in multifamily. So how did you come up with this concept, and do you feel like it really works for people?
It's a great question. And what comes to my mind as I was just hearing you ask that question is like the concept of carrots and sticks. As an industry, I think we've always used sticks to encourage the right type of behavior.
Yes.
As a renter, I'll just kind of go back to one of the founding sort of like stories we always tell about Modern Message. As a renter, I myself felt like no one cared if I stayed or if I left the building. And at the same time, I had friends everywhere. Let me say that differently. Friends in apartments all over the town, and each one had a different vibe, different experience, but like you couldn't find any of that online. It was completely not obvious what made one apartment great and one apartment really bad to live at, unless you knew somebody. Now, back in like the late 2008, 2009 period, there was a lot of oversupply in Dallas, and so every apartment was offering like 1 or 2 months free. And here I was like, okay, well, if I move every year, I get 2 months free. Why would I not move to a new apartment every year? But I didn't know where to move, and I knew some people had bad experiences, right? So like, what was the actual experience of living on site was the question that could not be answered back then. The review sites, which were very, very few, every review was negative. And that was largely the industry's point of view on reviews until like 2015. I know this because everyone laughed at us when we talked about reputation as a component of our rewards program. And now you have to be very careful about how you talk about this stuff. But for me, it was simply, when you move in, how did we do? Think like surveys, right? But surveys typically are points in time, and they're not operationalized in some sense other than holding your staff accountable. But what we found consistently is if someone has, and we found correlations to all of this, if someone gives you a 5-star review when they move in, they're more likely to renew. Consistent. If you engage residents throughout the lease, they stay longer. If you engage them consistently, they rate you higher. And there's no magic to it. It's not like this is causing them directionally to think, like, it may plant seeds, right? But the service quality still has to be there, or the renewals are going to struggle. The rent's not going to, you're not going to see the rents that you're wanting to see. So all of these things work in concert together. But what we noticed is that incentives matter, rewards matter, but in the right context. And so with that thesis and hypothesis, we went out for eight years on our own and now 4 years at RealPage, listening to clients ask us the question, like, what else could we incentivize? What else could, like, and we would always turn it back on them. What are the things that you're wanting to do? You know, you've got the late fee for somebody who doesn't pay on time. What if we reward people for paying on time in the first place? It hits people differently.
Yeah, it gives
right?
them, they feel satisfied.
They
And they want to pay on time.
Exactly. Because the sense of loss is actually a stronger motivation than gaining something. Like, it's funny, if you look at all of the psychology studies on gamification programs, it's the anticipation of receiving something that's where all the dopamine hits, or maybe it's serotonin. You know what I'm saying? The excitement is in the lead up to something, not when you get it. So for this, if you have a point total that's available to you for doing something very clearly what you would otherwise want to do, that can actually be a stronger motivator, stronger pull for someone to complete that task rather than getting hit with a late fee.
I like to think about it when you're renting, you feel like you're not getting anything in return. I've heard that a lot from even like my friends. I don't want to just throw away my money. But now you've created something where they feel like they're getting something in return.
That's right. That's right. We looked at it, and I was back in my consulting days, like, I was traveling all the time. So I'm still to this day like an avid points person on all these, the Dallas, like, it's all American, right? So I only fly American. Usually only stay at Hilton hotels because I have status, and that status translates to value. The only industry where that typically has not been deployed is real estate. And so we saw an opportunity early on to bring that concept into the space. And that's a big part of why we joined RealPage. Was RealPage had the payments business. That was not our historical skill set, was all things payments. And so we saw the opportunity to join up with them, continue to scale it out, and ultimately just add more value to residents. Like, our program was always not required. So it was actually like every exec at RealPage was always shocked to hear our story, because we would reach out to residents multiple times a month. We didn't ask for any permission when we did it, because it was always under the guise of, we love that you're here. How can we do more for you, right? So we were always an arm of the marketing team, by and large, to make sure that residents felt valued. And so that gave us license. You know, we had worked with 2.5 million residents it wasn't a small product. And we had, I think, 6 of the top 10 managers and owners on our platform. So these were the biggest and the best in kind of all aspects, who fully trusted us to make sure that their residents were having a great experience. And so I just look at it like, this is why I'm so keen on understanding how customers are perceiving the next 12 months, the next 24 months. What are the things you're needing? What are the things you're seeing that are different? And then how can a loyalty program help you delay? And maybe it's not always us, maybe it's something else. Fraud, for example, is something that not totally solved by a loyalty program.
Yeah, I'd love for you to solve that.
Yeah. So we have other tools at RealPage that can solve that.
We're also using those tools.
Exactly. And that's what I love about RealPage. It's rather than us in a startup staying in our lane, we can look across the entire resident journey and understand, do we have a solution somewhere for this? And if we do, can we pull it into Loft, our new resident platform? I
know. Yeah, let's go over to Loft. So congratulations on the launch again. That is huge. So what inspired the entire creation of Loft?
So I certainly don't want to make it seem like this was modern messaging community words or my unique approach, because it was not at all. I said before, when we sold the company, partly what we sold it to do, and I said a little earlier, we saw the correlation to 5-star reviews early on to renewals. Our program has always existed with two key value props, reputation and renewals. And we always saw these correlate. Well, if we knew that the move-in phase was essential to get that 5-star review, why not move further upstream into the move-in phase to help solve that even earlier? Well, we weren't a move-in business, right? And we saw an opportunity. It seemed like at that time, no one really loved the moving solutions that existed. And so we saw an opportunity to, what do we need to do to move into that category? And so when we talked to Steve Wynn and RealPage back then, we pitched them this idea of an end-to-end loyalty program attached to the resident portals. And then what we didn't contemplate at that time was moving even further upstream to the leasing context so that you could truly have an end-to-end solution. And so with Loft, and this goes back, I mentioned at the very top, we have a great corporate strategy team. It's their job, thankfully, to look further out into the future to really understand that, are we in alignment with where this industry is going, with where technology is going, with where consumer behavior is going. And so they saw an opportunity that ended up becoming, so with their focus, with my team's focus, with a bunch of, I mean, it was a full like executive strategy session at RealPage. Not to share all the sausage making, but it took about a year of internal understanding, conversations with customers, and ultimately betas with residents to flesh out exactly where Loft needed to be focused. And so what I love about it is this wasn't concocted in a lab somewhere, and then we spent a year building it and threw it out and then just hope people liked it. We directly, and you guys were a big part of that, and we wanted our customers to be involved in the build process. I mentioned, but I was talking earlier about the way you motivate teams is to pull them into the process, give them some autonomy. With customers, if customers feel, this is why startups are so dangerous in this industry. Every startup pulls a customer in, they co-create something with them, and next thing you know, they turn to everyone else in the industry and say, look how great this is, right? Because it's their work.
It's a
And
beautiful
so
thing.
here, I just sort of played, to the extent I had a part in this, it was running that same playbook to where customers knew they could have a seat at the table of building this new platform. And yes, we pulled from our existing capabilities for sure, right? And we just looked at, where are we short? Where are we strong? What are customers expecting? What are we delivering on that makes a ton of sense and we should continue? What are we not focused on at all that we need to add? Like moving is a good example there. RealPage didn't have a moving solution until now. Candidly, we probably should have had one 5 years ago. That was partly where we wanted to focus when we were first acquired. COVID hit. RealPage itself was sold.
Yeah.
So there's always things that don't happen at the same time, at the exact time that you want them to. But to me, I just look at it, again, I go back to, if you have a detailed view of a resident journey, where are all the moments you can add value? And what you'd see is, if we really maybe take that up to a 10,000-foot view, you see Loft just sitting directionally on top of that with one platform. So that once a resident chooses you from an ILS or a marketing site, at that moment, they're inside of Loft and they never leave until hopefully they renew, and then they stay even longer. But ultimately, when they move out, they're in one application end to end. It just makes it simpler for everybody.
It truly is a seamless experience for them. So was there like any big aha moment and that influenced the development of this, where you guys were like, whoa, that was the missing piece. This is what we needed to do? Or was it just a series of little problem solving?
Two things. Because I don't work in the leasing context every day, what I did not appreciate when we were first putting the strategy together was how essential leasing was to the whole thing. And that's probably a combination of, honestly, AI. It's never been easier to fake an identity. And so fraud is just rampant right now compared to where it's been over the last, 20, 30 years. So you got fraud on the rise. Everyone's looking for new solutions or better solutions to deal with this, which puts leasing at the crosshairs of what everyone's trying to solve. So when we're out talking about a new resident experience and seamless platform and end-to-end all these things, everyone initially jumps to, what are you doing in leasing? And so I've had to level up my knowledge on leasing quickly, because that's what everyone wanted to talk about. And I've been one of the few people who've been out talking about Loft for the last six plus months. So fraud and leasing are for sure, I think, the two things that jumped out at me quickly, because it didn't map to what I thought. And then how consequential the move-in phase, let me say that differently, how broken the move-in phase continues to be, was a surprise. And everyone immediately jumped on that. Of course, everyone wants their ways to customize, and that's always the nuance of building in multifamily is, can you provide the right levels of customizations that customers want?
Yeah.
And we're continuing to work through that. But I can't think of any customer who said, I use a moving service, I love it, I'm not going to move off of it. Like almost to a company, maybe there's one example I can't think of, but almost everyone was like, we'd love to check it. We'd love to check it out. It's inside the same product. I don't have to
Even
go
better.
train on anything else. Fantastic. Where do I sign up?
That's pretty much how we were. So walk us through any challenges you might have had during this process.
I think the biggest challenge, a mentor of mine, her phrase was always, businesses don't die from starvation, they die from gluttony. And when you're as big as RealPage, everyone has an opinion on what is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
So in a world where every customer has a different point of view, every internal stakeholder has a different point of view, and the sky's the limit, because I guarantee you RealPage has a product for everything, right? So how do you pick something to go solve quickly? I mentioned before about perfect can be the enemy of the good. Well, internally, like for a big company, annual budget, just like your company, I assume, budget cycles are critical.
Yes.
Right? If you miss the mark this year from last year's budget, meaning it took longer than you thought, it may not make it into the next year's budget. And so next thing you know, this big, exciting initiative is now shuttered because it was deemed impossible or too hard. So you have to always be thinking about what's the signal, what's the noise, what's possible, what's not possible yet. I don't want to say impossible. Some things just aren't possible yet, so that you can show momentum. Like my whole view on all of this is the way I build trust with you is when we talk, like when you say you want something and it's my job to go build it, I'm going to come back to you in a week and show you what I did. And then the next week and show you what I did. And the next week. And then yes, sometimes I won't have much of an update. Sometimes it won't be perfect for what you wanted, but through that back and forth, you know that I'm a trusted partner. Mm-hmm. The worst thing I can do is we talk and then I go hide for a year and then I come back and I show it to you and you're like, oh, I thought it'd be bigger or I thought it'd be smaller. I thought it'd be blue.
It's not what I wanted.
It's not what I wanted, right? That's how trust falls apart. And so all that being said, the trickiest part of an initiative this ambitious is maintaining internal alignment, external awareness, and dealing with change management at all times, because dev roadmaps it's my example I give to everyone is if you've ever built a house, it's probably the closest thing to it, where timelines change on you all the time because something is discovered, right? Or this product wasn't ready at the right time when that was a dependency on something else. And so suddenly you thought it'd be done summer, like this summer, and now it's next summer. Your first time going through that, it can be quite frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And the sales price is never the actual price.
Exactly. So software is very similar, where all these dependencies can be uncovered. It can take longer, complexity is an issue. So roadmaps tend to shift. And so RealPage is 8,000 employees, I think. And so if everyone walked away with an understanding a month ago of the time or of the roadmap, and then it shifts, and they've all told their customers, how do we go back, maintain trust, but also deliver value? That's, for a company of RealPage's size, that's the hardest part of this whole thing, is ensuring that we're both being open and honest from a transparency perspective with our customers. We're building this, here's the timeline. But when things change, how do we communicate that in a way that we maintain trust?
My big thing is honestly keeping up with all the different names you guys have for everything. Half
Also
the time,
that.
I'm like, what is that again?
We're consolidating brands. There will be fewer. That's one of the things I'm proudest of. We've actually shut down several products already, which I was told from people who've been at RealPage longer, that never happens historically. So we're making strides.
That's all. I was like, oh, this sounds great. And then I can never remember the name of it. And I feel like everyone's talking a different language. So AI-powered tools and fraud detection are key components of Loft. How do these technologies enhance the leasing and payment process?
Leasing's an easy example there, especially on fraud. It's the same tools that are new for our industry are new for many industries. And so people are excited about what they can do. But there's plenty of bad actors out there who are leveraging these same technologies to do things like fake identities. It's never been easier. I'm sure you guys are seeing this all over the place.
I can't do enough to mitigate fraud.
And I hear in Atlanta, it's like one of the worst cities in the country.
We are one of the worst. That's not a brag. But that means we know the most about it and how to, so we can go into any market.
Those are experts.
But it's just grown so rampantly. Really before, I think 2020 was a game changer on it too. It was very much in the metro areas, and now we're seeing it everywhere.
Yep. So for us, we look at it on the fraud side and say, like, how can we leverage these tools to do a better job of detecting fraud? And so we're making massive investments into all aspects of the leasing cycle, but specifically in the fraud piece, leveraging different companies that are best in class and integrating them directly into the product so that we're able to pull not necessarily bad actors, but people that wouldn't like flow through your criteria, catch them early so that we don't waste their time, we're not wasting your time, just help you focus your energies on the highest quality applicants, like the people that are most likely to close. That's honestly where I see this being the most impactful currently. And then on top of that, I mentioned earlier about translations, like what percent of this industry doesn't speak English as a first language? It's higher than you would think,
Yeah.
right? Especially in certain markets. And so typically these tools are all in English, which, okay, that's fine. It's been fine for a long time, but through AI, we can actually like real time translate these apps for those people. So that if you're speaking Spanish is an easy one, but what about certain other languages that we don't really ever think to go build? And these things take time on the dev side to build. And so it can lead everyone feeling like they're not being served properly. So that's one of the things I honestly, just from like me as a person, what I love is that we can provide better experiences for people that typically don't rise to the top of our roadmaps because it's just a very small percent of people speak that language. And so they struggle to navigate these solutions through things like AI translations. Now we can actually tailor the experience for them so that they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel served.
That's a way different customized experience that I'm
Way
sure is
different.
invaluable to a lot of people who speak different languages. That's not a primary where they're living today.
Exactly. And sitting in a software company's walls in Dallas, Texas, we may not think of that intrinsically, but we're talking to our affordable operators specifically, they tell us this all the time. Like we're struggling in certain groups because like in a part of New
Pockets,
York
yeah.
or part of, there's these pockets of folks that just can't use these tools. Okay, let's go figure out a way to solve that.
I love that. So with the growing role of technology in real estate, how do you see Loft evolving in the next few years?
I think it's going to always continue to evolve. I mentioned before, understanding who your customers are is the best way to just perceive the world, quite frankly. And with multifamily, what I love on the B2B side, B2C can be a trickier animal because you're dealing with culture and culture can change overnight.
Yeah.
When it's people's jobs, like the actual tasks don't change that quickly. You still need to lease apartments. You still need to close leads. You still need to have a marketing site. Like these things are more durable, but the technology lens you're viewing it through will change, if not annually, every other year. Like it's still sometimes it's every quarter.
It feels that way for sure.
Certainly in the last couple of years. And so Loft is a platform and platforms continue to evolve as technology shifts, right? There's a future where I could have my own AI agent and Pegasus could have your own AI agent, and I could find an apartment simply by sending mine off to deal with yours and negotiate an apartment, and I never even have to like do anything. It just kicks me a note saying your parameters of 2 bedroom, 2,000, whatever, $1,000.
Here's the best one.
Here's the best one. Sign it, click a button, I'm done. Right? Like that's a completely different world than physically finding a website or finding a list of available offerings off an ILS, navigating to a marketing site, calling the office, logging into their leasing portal, coming to view. I mentioned I had I don't know if it's the pleasure of owning a couple apartments in Fort Worth. We now have, the only way we tour one of these buildings is with a self-guided tour.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have anyone on site. Someone can show up. There's a scheduling aspect to it. We don't have anyone on site. There's a unit that they can go take a look at. It's on a mobile phone. 2019, everyone was talking like that was 20 years away.
Yeah, well, 2020 expedited all of that. I remember buying everyone we could get a hold of just to keep ourselves going. But I don't feel like the consumer has completely changed all their practices to that. Now it depends on the market that you're in and really the age of that person.
Yep.
But I do feel like that is the wave of the future. How quickly do you think we're going to get to, you probably don't know, but I just want to put you on the spot here, Mike, our AIs talking to each other? Because I'm not sure that I'm ready for that.
I'll answer that with a similar story. So in about 2015, every single engineer at our company would have told you that by now, people would not even be driving. It would all be self-driving cars.
Yeah, we're not that advanced yet.
And I remember back then going, that doesn't seem likely. Like culture shifts so much slower. Like there's early adopters and then there's laggards. By the time like the middle starts to adopt these technologies, it's usually way further down the road than people expect. So When do I think the average person will have like a personal agent? I immediately jump to like my mom. When will my mom do this? I don't know that she would ever do this. She's 72.
My mom's not doing it. I
Yeah,
can tell you that.
yeah. My in-laws actually have my wife and I buy all their Amazon packages because they don't want them to know anything about them. They don't want to have their identity stolen, right? So there's going to be people that are slower to adopt everything. I think it's further off than people think. Now, when can it start happening? I think that's pretty close. I think you're starting. I've heard. I mean, heck, you can currently have an AI agent go out and do certain things for you, like in a constrained way. When do I think that'll be the norm? That feels at least 5+ years off. Like it's still too new. These technologies are still adjusting too
I was just
quickly.
wondering. I'm just going to put you on the spot there
No,
for
it's an
that
interesting
one.
question.
We'll time capsule this and then bring it back to
Yeah,
you
we'll come back.
when when it actually happens, so we can know. So Loft is currently in beta at Pegasus with plans for a wider rollout, which we're all really excited about. What improvements or new features can customers expect to see in the near future?
I mentioned before, change management is one of our challenges, and that's just because we have so many stakeholders. So I'm going to say some things, and I'm curious to see you react. So literally every month for the foreseeable future, there's going to be some upgrade to Loft, if not multiple upgrades. That's happening now. We have a full concession tool that's now available. So if you have to offer any concessions, instead of giving a rent concession, you can do it with a digital incentive. Allows you to save some money and gives residents more choice. That's come since real world. So a lot of this is since real world. We're adding new payment methods, mobile check scan, other types of payments. Payment methods are coming in the next 45 days. Our moving solution is continuing to roll out various capabilities. That's on schedule. Leasing will begin its beta inside of Loft in early Q1, and then everything will be called Loft in early Q1 as well. So we're really in a glide slope to a bunch of monumental achievements for RealPage. RealPage has been on this product to platform transition for at least several. I forget exactly when they first talked about that publicly. We'll say a couple of years, 2 to 3 years. And this is not the only example. There are others, but to take our leasing tools or portals or our rewards products, launch a moving solution, and then collapse it all into one application with one login end to end, all that'll be here in the first half of 25 and most of it in Q1.
My reaction is I'm so excited. And normally I would be very pensive with all that change, but because the product was so seamless for our teams, in fact, some of them didn't even know it was happening to them, that I feel confident, because typically that would come with a lot of rollouts on our end and between RealPage and us. But I know that this product has been really, really wonderful for us and our residents. So that's really exciting.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, truly. So how are data analytics changing the way we monetize the resident experience?
The way I think of that question, I've said a couple times now, like the resident journey. What data analytics will show you through experimentation and other things, or simply just observation, is what's working, what's not working. And so and honestly, let me take a step back. There's another story I'll tell real quick about some of like how Loft was created. We ourselves, and we actually hired 2 different management consulting groups. And part of what they did was we ran several independent surveys of our residents, simply trying to understand what were they wanting from, this was heavily on the reward side, but what do residents want from a product like this, and specifically a loyalty rewards program? And it was pretty surprising. Like most people, I think, certainly like those of us who are like VP and above levels of companies, you typically would think, oh, people want to take a trip or they want travel. And that was on the list, but it wasn't anywhere near the top. My point here is getting a clear sense of what people are wanting and attaching that to the tasks that they're completing in the resident journey gives you a unique opportunity to apply a unique strategic lens from whether it's a fee manager or owner operator or software vendor for how can we add in these value-added moments. Like the easiest example is insurance. Someone needs insurance. Let's give them an offer to take our insurance, right? Like that's an easy example. People need insurance. We have insurance. Let's marry that into a moment where with no extra thought, it actually is reducing tasks, because now they don't have to go to Google. They don't have to find something random. They can pick one that's highly vetted, highly rated, and it's a price point that they want. Well, those are the easy examples. What are others? Like one of the things I see over the next 5 years, and it's already happening now to some degree, is what if we start thinking outside of our walls? How do we bring the community inside the walls, in a sense, right? We're here in Alpharetta, Georgia. It's my first time here. If I didn't know you guys, like where would we go to dinner tonight? I would go to Google. Well, if I live in an apartment that's next door to something fantastic, how can we pull that into the equation? That's simply knowing what a local submarket likes, who lives at my building, what are they wanting, and bringing or operationalizing that mindset into the product landscape. So I don't like the phrase monetizing the resident. I know it's common in our industry. I simply, like, the way I interpret that is, if you need something or if you want something and I have something that you need or you want, let's make that transaction as seamless or as easy as possible. One of the best examples for, you mentioned data analytics. We had a partnership, this was a couple years ago, with a dog walking company. And inside of Community Rewards, we just made it, we had a perks program, still do, where you just, here's a free month of dog walking. Everyone saw it, like, we made it visible. It had okay adoption. And we were like, all right, what else could we do? This goes back to allowing people to experiment. What if we ask people when they join the program if they have a pet, and then we show it to them in a different way? The results were 10x.
Really?
Yeah. Because once you prime someone, they're thinking about their pet, they love their pet. Here's something for your pet. And we found like a 10x improvement in click rates by simply thinking of what this person might want in that moment. And it just simply, if you know your audience, if you have things for them, opportunities are going to be endless. And that will change, right? As technology changes, as culture changes, there'll be new ways in which people can find value. But it all goes back to the same framework. Understand your audience, understand your customer.
So from your area of expertise, what specific metrics would you suggest property managers focus on to help them maximize improving their resident experience?
The obvious one here is sentiment. Like, how are people feeling about your service over time? So there's plenty of reputation management tools out there. The way I would really think of it is, we call them pulse checks. How you view me in month 1 is going to be fundamentally different than how you view me in month 12. As I approach a renewal, that's really where you want to know how they feel about you. And so being able to take these, because what percent of people will leave a review on a third-party site? Low single digits on average, right? So it's, if you're just looking to Google to give
really mad person will.
Exactly. And odds are it's going to be after their car got broken into, or something that may or may not have been
outside. That never happens.
Something that may be outside of your control, but they're going to associate it with you, and so your reviews are going to reflect that. So that's that's a lagging indicator. Well, what if we could move upstream and really get a sense of, from move in to move out, how are people feeling about this specific site? But now you have views across all your sites. So then you can say, okay, our average is, you guys are probably average 4.5 to 5 star. Well, what if you have one site that's a 3.5 star? Still good, but way worse than average. That gives you a chance to go, what's unique over here, right? And so it's using data we all have, but just thinking of it differently. Because now you're trying to make sure that you get some feedback from someone about how they're feeling about you as early as possible. And then you watch it trend. Is the trend down? Is it up? Is it flat? Because if you're seeing everyone likes it when they move in, hates it when they move out, what's happening? Response rates slow, service requests not getting closed in time, right? Everyone's different, but those are for tools like us, like, we really look at adoption, participation rates, frequency of use.
And you have a really high adoption rate in Loft, don't you? I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but what is that typically?
It depends on asset class, but I mean, we'll see, 70, 80+% of an entire site adopt. One of the things that's most surprising, and this is something like we want to do a better job of on the one site side, is exposing how many emails are not good. So they're just like someone fat fingered it or they didn't give one.
Yeah. And
the importance of capturing email coverage so that you can do your business, right? You want everyone to know that something's happening.
I don't know if I want to see those reports.
And again, it varies wildly by asset class, but we've seen it as high as 50+% of emails that we have on file are just ineffective. Like, they're not valid emails. That's not for you guys.
Great data to have.
That's not y'all stat, but we've seen certain operators that are that high. So giving you the data back to simply just be aware of it and then manage it. It's the old cliche of whatever gets measured gets managed. And so for us, we look at early indicators. Are people adopting our products? Are they using it frequently? Are they submitting service requests online? Are they paying their rent online? How are they rating the property? That's more on the loyalty side. Things like this just give us a clear view of, are people continuing to transact inside of our sphere of influence, or are we churning them out so that they go on site, which is making your operations less efficient?
Great.
Just a few examples.
With sustainability and wellness being major trends right now, how do you see these factors playing into the future of elevating the resident experience?
It's a good question. This is an area I think we could all do a better job of thinking more deeply around. I'll give you one example though. So with Loft, we now have a moving solution. And so we have a number of different conversations that are going on. And one of them's with an energy provider that is 100% renewable. There's no extra cost. They actually can give, I think, their tax credits back to the owner because they're able to handle it in a fully renewable way. And that's just a microcosm. That's one moment out of 100 plus moments inside of Loft that we can think about it differently. Like historically, I mean, how often do you guys talk about renewable energy? For us, it's
Probably a couple times a year.
yeah, it's something might trigger it. You know, it's a
Yeah.
conversation here or there, but it's not something you're actively managing. Well, when you affect every moment of the resident journey, suddenly you have these opportunities to go and you put it to the resident. Do you want the best deal, or do you also want to go fully renewable? This vendor happens to, the way they've structured it is like you can get both the best deal and have it fully renewable. And so we're talking to them about integrating. A lot of this though is about like our largest customers, their big push on the heels of COVID, but even leading up to it, was fully paperless. So pulling everything online, everything off the backs of the office, especially now if you may be struggling to staff the leasing office. And so there's just fewer people in there. And so being able to do everything paperless is something we certainly are striving to do because that's where we can really align with our customers. And then other things like energy are just one example of many. Anyway, those are the things that come to mind.
That's great. So where do you see the biggest growth opportunities in adding value in the next 5 to 10 years?
5 to 10, I may have already said this. When you say growth, I assume you mean revenue opportunities. I really think we as an industry are doing a good job of transacting inside our walls, things that we need to run our business. Pulling in the local community into that in a scalable way, I think is one of the leveraging AI, leveraging different technologies, I think is an interesting way to think about, honestly, further differentiating your product. What makes one Class A community great? It's location, right? By and large.
Yep.
And so how do we let everyone around that also have a position inside of these applications? I think that it's an interesting monetization conversation when you think of that. And I think there's certainly a lot of upside there. But again, it goes back to knowing your residents. If you're providing something that they don't want, it doesn't matter what you're offering. They're not going to transact with it. And one of the best examples there is we have one of our most popular features on the loyalty side is simply our polling feature. It's no extra cost. People can run nationwide polls for your entire portfolio in about 5 seconds. It's just what questions do you want to ask. And so we had several large operators who used to do all this like central planning for the resident events, completely threw that away, and they would just every other week ask the residents, what do you want to have next week for your next resident
Oh, I
event?
love
Here are
that.
5 ideas. And people responded more positively. They attended more often. Sentiment improved. It's just that simple. Asking people what they want and giving it to them.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your time today. I
No
appreciate
problem.
it.
It's great being here.
Thank you for being here.